Okay, next up is our strategic planning and utilization of resources, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. I'm going to ask our team to go ahead and begin to come forth, and Ms. Neil Wallace is going to get our PowerPoint kind of queued up here. I want to start off by recognizing, as Madam Chair did with previous boards and the work that they have done financially to get us where we are. We are a very fortunate district to be able to offer the many programs through the resources that our district provides. Having worked in two larger districts, I've had a chance to see what commitment that this board and our staff do to make sure that we have. But this board is well aware that over the past 2 years, we have been working on planning and going through several reports and a lot of information about how best to use the resources that we have. One of the challenges that this board gave to myself, which obviously translates into our district team and schools, making sure that we are using academic programming as a means to guide us in our decision-making process. The mission of the Rock Hill School District is to provide all children with challenging work that authentically engages them, no matter what that academic programming is, whether it's a special one or traditional. And this board has requested, through the work that we did over the past year and a half, through the presentations that we were doing, through our planning process, to make sure that we were all being good stewards of the monies and the resources that we have. And so as we have used that information and that feedback and guidance and direction, we have established certain goals that we want to make sure that we achieve, and those are listed here. As they pertain to the academic programming, having choice opportunities and choice academic programs to meet the needs of our families is very important to this board as well as the school district. And so some of our programs have been built out and have a clear pathway K-12. Others need to be further developed. Some of the programs we have, we want to make sure that we are looking at to meet the needs of all who are participating in those. If we have a program that's not quite meeting the expectations or addressing the needs, then we need to go back and gain information and feedback and make sure that we change that, we regroup, we eliminate if need be, but we also have the opportunity to add. We also want to make sure that our master plan to address facility needs has been redeveloped, reset based on what we did over the past year. Our plan previously was pre-COVID, and we know that a lot has happened, and we have, as this board has grappled with our community and the presentations that we did, a lot of issues around our facilities. We have a lot of older, established buildings in our inventory, and making sure that we provide our students with 21st century environments. We also want to make sure that we attract new families or families to our district, and we want to maintain those very positive relationships with families who are currently in our district, because we know that's what's really going to create our Rock Hill community. And then finally, to offer academic programs that meet the needs of the community. We know we have a lot of businesses who are interested in coming to Rock Hill. We're excited certainly about the Panthers and other businesses coming. And as we just heard through our financial audit, when our community is strong with business partnerships, then that contributes too. So trying to meet the needs of those as a school district and making sure that we provide students who are college and career ready is a goal for our district. So in saying that, I offer for our instruction division, our human resources, our maintenance and operations have all to come together under Dr. Wilk's leadership as the Chief of Strategic Planning, Program Support, and Engagement. I know that's a new title in his new position. And so he has been working with our team to come up with options, and I want to emphasize that tonight's presentation is about options. The board asked for us to bring options to you, so to make sure that we were meeting the goals of the district, the expectations that you have and that we have of what our resources are. And so tonight you're going to hear some options for you to consider, as well as to present to our community for consideration and get feedback on. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wallace, and Ms. Wallace is presenting on behalf of Dr. Jones and the Instruction Division.
Good evening, everyone. Our instruction department is committed to creating K-12 pathways that align to the mission of Rock Hill Schools, and we're going to take a look at some instructional goals and the framework around them. Based on the board survey that was taken earlier this year, you've identified 3 priorities: to expand the programs at ATC, expand the offerings of pre-K, and to expand schools of choice. We have 5-year instructional goals that our department has created. That is to conduct a district-wide needs assessment on student interest for planning of choice programming expansion. We want to know what the needs of the community and career around us are. We want to know what the needs of the families are as it relates to choice programming. We are also committed to increasing equity and opportunity within the programs for all students, so that every student has an opportunity to participate in our choice programming. We also want to ensure access to choice programs for all families and continue to focus on improving student learning and performance as a result of what we offer in Rock Hill Schools. We also intend to increase clarity of district pathways. As Dr. Cook mentioned, we have some pathways that are clearly defined and established, and we have some that we feel we need to reevaluate and take a look at. We want to build effective student completions in those pathways and improve student performance as a result of that, and increase family satisfaction that meets the needs of all of our stakeholders. Next steps for the instruction team is to conduct a needs assessment and/or a feasibility study within the school district to align our district resources, to seek further stakeholder input in the means of survey or analysis of maybe possible career pathways, how what we offer aligns to those needs, to seek further stakeholder input, visit and observe locations in which desired programs exist. We know that there are model programs that we can offer to other districts, and we also know that there are other model programs out there that we can visit to learn from as well. We want to begin work to develop a plan that bolsters interest and application into the choice programming so that underrepresented populations have an opportunity to equally participate. We also want to align our programming with the district's plans for facilities, attendance zones, choice programming process, and open enrollment. Next up.
You have additional information at your seat that will provide you some more detailed information on these slides for the facility cost. This chart here illustrates the total cost the district has paid for regular maintenance for each of the elementary schools over a 10-year period based on the building's square footage. Examples of expenditures that would be included in regular maintenance would be cleaning services, cleaning supplies, maintaining the grounds for those schools, safety and security services, and any day-to-day operational maintenance items. So these schools are listed in descending order from the highest cost to the lowest cost over the past 10 fiscal years. The 10-year cost per square footage ranges from $17.78 per square foot at Ebenezer Avenue to $11.19 per square foot at Mount Gallant. Cherry Park Elementary is illustrated on the far right column, in which the cost per square footage is for 2 years only. This chart illustrates the total cost the district has paid for utilities for each of the elementary schools over the 10-year period based on the building's square footage. These schools are also listed in descending order from the highest cost to the lowest cost over these 10 years. The 10-year cost per square footage ranges from $15.23 at India Hook to $8.36 at Independence. Cherry Park Elementary is again illustrated in the far right column, in which the cost per square footage is for 2 years only. This chart illustrates the average maintenance cost for each of the elementary schools for the past 10 fiscal years based on the school's 135th day ADM, average daily membership. These schools are listed in descending order from the highest average cost per pupil of $242 per pupil at Finley Road to the lowest average per pupil cost of $140 per pupil at Richmond Drive. The average per pupil cost for Cherry Park is $139 per pupil for the past 2 years.
Ms. Smith, I apologize for interrupting, but I can see that our PowerPoint does not have the school names, but board members, you have this packet. Those school names are in this information. If you need to see the folder that you received earlier, yes. They should be in that packet with the school names on those, so my apology for that, but they're in this particular packet with the school names. Sorry about that, Ms. Smith.
This chart illustrates the average utilities cost for each of the elementary schools for the past 10 fiscal years based on the school's 135-day average daily membership for utilities. The average 10-year cost per pupil for utilities ranges from the highest average cost of $243 per pupil at Finley Road to the lowest average cost of $99 per pupil at Independence Elementary. And of course, Cherry Park is in the far right-hand column because they only have 2 years of data. This chart illustrates the total cost the district has paid for capital improvements for each of the elementary schools over a 10-year period based on the building square footage. We all know that Cherry Park will have the highest total cost per square footage because it is new construction. Ebenezer is school number 2 on that slide. They are the second highest total cost per square footage for the 10-year period because of the large addition that we did in our last building program. The remaining schools range from $103 per square footage at Northside, in which we added the addition of the auditorium, to the lowest per square footage of $3.50 at Mount Holly. Most of the capital improvements at the elementary level were for safety and security improvements that we implemented after the Sandy Hook shooting. And this last slide illustrates the average cost per pupil for capital improvements based on the 135-day average daily membership over this 10-year period. The average 10-year period per pupil cost ranges from $5,437 per pupil for Cherry Park, which is school number 1, to $54 per pupil for Mount Holly, which is school number 17.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity tonight to come talk to you about the utilization of our facilities. And tonight, Ms. Wallace and Mr. Allen and myself will go through the next few slides and answer any questions that you may have. Just as a reminder, the next 2 slides are results of board priorities, and just as a reminder that when we talk about the utilization of our facilities, that condition, utilization, and capacity were also all important to the board when it came to making decisions. Also, as a reminder, when we talk about the size of our schools, it is the board's wishes that our high schools stay within the enrollment of 1,800 to 2,100. Our middle schools would be somewhere between 800 and 1,000, and our elementary schools' optimum enrollment would be 550 to 750 students.
So what you're saying now is the current attendance zones?
These attendance zones haven't changed since we've added Mount Holly Elementary School. You'll see in the middle of our district are satellites that feed Mount Gallant, Old Point, Evanport, and Rosewood. Here's current enrollment. The current enrollment is based on Power School numbers. What we did with our project here is we dealt strictly with geocoded numbers. And basically what that means is whatever that school zone is, it's based on kids that live within that zone. So there's always going to be a discrepancy between geocoded numbers and Power School numbers. We're using just geocode numbers.
And just to be clear, this is people living in this district. It does not take the current virtual academy or anything special that we are doing this year into account.
Yes,
Correct?
ma'am. Correct.
Just want to clarify that mainly for our viewing audience.
Thank you.
To add one point of clarification on this particular slide, these are the current enrollments by building, and that these numbers as a percentage of capacity do include virtual students because it's current enrollment in Power School, but the further information is based on geocode.
Okay.
So tonight, we would like to discuss several options with the board. Option one would be the minimum impact to our district, which would be to explore options for repurposing Finley Road Elementary School. As shown, students presently enrolled at Finley Road Elementary School would be reassigned to new schools. So out of the students, the 383 students that are, as Mr. Allen said, are geocoded for Finley Road, 8 would be reassigned for Ebenezer, 27 for Evanport, 96 to Richmond Drive, 156 to Sunset Park, and 96 to York Road Elementary School. Again, option one is the minimum impact to our district.
On the subsequent slide, what you see is the gray bars represent the 45-day enrollment that we saw 2 slides ago. And the yellow bar is what option one would be if we repurposed the indicated school. We've also given you a few lines of average. So across, you can see that there's a lot of variation right now in the yellow lines and what that would look like. And the blue represents the capacity of 75% that the board has indicated would be optimum capacity across the schools. So the red line is the current average based on the results of option one, and then the blue is the capacity that the board has indicated.
Option 2B, and why is there not an option 2A? So in 2A, there were students transitioned into schools and out of schools. District administration wanted to minimize the number of students that would be affected, so 2B was developed to decrease the number of students that would be moved or would have to be relocated. And each option builds on the previous option. So option 2B is to look at Finley Road Elementary School plus eliminate attendance satellites. This option includes and eliminates the attendance satellites or pockets of attendance zones not contiguous with the primary school zone. Satellites contribute to extended bus ride times and lower parental involvement. Eliminating satellites helps to create neighborhood schools. So there are 5 satellites that we would be looking at and assessing. Old Point, which is 123 students, Mount Gallant, 158 students, Rosewood, 143 students, Evanport, 98 students, Ebenezer Avenue, 44 students. So these students would be reassigned to 143 to Bellevue, 143 to Ebenezer, 123 to Oakdale, 44 to Rosewood, and 113 to Sunset. So with this, as we stated earlier, option 1 would only affect 383 students. Option 2B would affect 949 students. That would be option 1 to 383 plus the 566 students that are in the satellites now. So 566 plus the 383 would be the 949 total students that would be affected in option 2B.
Similarly, we've given you a bar graph to show the enrollment based on option 2B. Again, the gray bars are the 45-day enrollment from a few slides previous, and the yellow lines indicate option 2B, what the enrollments would be. You can see the variability in the yellow lines of the new enrollments. You also see, again, that the red line represents option 2B's percentage of capacity, and you'll notice that that red line is growing closer to the blue line, which is the capacity of 75% that the board has indicated would be optimum. So trying to adjust the capacities, adjust the enrollments to get closer to that desired average.
Option 3C would be to reassess or reevaluate Finley Road Elementary School, eliminate our attendance satellites, and explore repurposing of Rosewood Elementary. Again, the question is, why is there not a 3A and a 3B? Again, 3A was the movement that we discussed previously with the 2A, so too many students moving within our district. When Mr. Allen ran the numbers for 3B, we actually had one school that was over 100% capacity. So that is why there is not a 3B. So 3C takes into account Rosewood students being reassessed or addressed to Evanport, 214 students, 32 students at India Hook, 154 students at Northside. There is discussion for the need of a possible northeast school in the future, so that is something that the master plan will look at in the future, but just as an opportunity there to discuss. We did talk about the total impact, and again, option 3 builds on option 1 and option 2. That is to close or reassess Finley Road, which is 383 students, eliminate the satellites, which is 566 students, and to potential repurpose Rosewood, which is 400 students, which makes this the largest number of students that would be affected at 1,349. With exploring repurposing either Finley Road or Rosewood, the board's goal of expanding our pre-K program to an all-day program at one location could possibly be achieved at one of these existing campuses.
A couple of things to note on this slide. You'll see in the bottom left corner, it says enrolled and geocode numbers as of the 45th day, which was October 8th of 2020. So if you were to look at our enrollment as of today, it would be different. We had to have a snapshot at one single point in time, so just to note that the date is down there. So if you look to match those up, that's the date of the data that we used. Also, in each of the three options, as Mr. Vaughn has presented, you'll notice over on the right-hand side, we've given you the enrolled number and percentage for each school. And in this case, because option 3 builds on the sum of 1 and 2 and 3, you see the proposed geocoded students allocated along with the percentage and the capacity numbers. And the format is the same on the 3 slides, but that gives you additional information. And again, we provide you with a bar graph to show you the gray, again, the 45-day enrollment that we've been looking at. The green is the enrollment based on the sum of options 1, 2B, and 3C. You can see that the green lines level out. There's not as much variability in them as there has been previously. You'll also note that the blue line, which is the capacity 75% that the board has indicated would be optimum, stays. And the percentage or the average of option 3C, the red line, is growing closer to the blue line, which is, so we're maximizing the capacity of the schools to the board's goal.
The board also asked us to look at 2 additional options, option 4 and option 5. That information is at your desk. Option 4 simply builds upon option 1, 2, and 3 and addresses an additional school, where option 5 also addresses an additional school in addition to option 4.
Board members, these 2 pages are the options 4 and 5 that Mr. Vaughn is referencing, these particular charts that are the last pages, I believe, in your packet on your desk.
Good evening again. As you can see, our team has provided a great deal of information to the board for your consideration this evening for the utilization of our district elementary facilities. When we're looking, our next steps, our community input, our marketing and communications department will start tomorrow soliciting feedback from our community on the options that you, our school board, directs us as the administration to pursue. We're looking at our study on our facility upfit. As presented tonight, Mr. Vaughn talked about 2 different facilities that we could look at for our upfitting for our pre-K programs, both Finley Road and Rosewood, which brings a lot of excitement because that is what the board has directed us to look at as priorities, to try to find a way to offer additional 4K options for our parents, and that would be looking at full-day 4K for more of our students, as well as being able to bring in some of our singleton programs that we have in some of our schools, and even offering some half-day programs if parents have the need for half-day programs at the 4K level. We're also looking at the feasibility and needs assessments for evaluating some of our special programs in some of our buildings and ensuring that we have the best facilities for those particular programs. And then one of the last pieces is revising that master plan that we're always looking at for our facilities. That is ongoing, and we will be able to take direction as far as our revisions to that plan after decisions have been made on how we need to move forward. We know that there is a lot of information that was provided. Our team is here to answer questions that you may have, and we're opening the floor at this time for your questions.
Mr. Falkenberry?
Yeah, I definitely want to thank everybody for pulling all this together. I know it's been probably very difficult to get all these numbers crunched so many times and so many iterations of it. A couple things. One, just for clarity for everyone that doesn't have these sheets, option 4 and 5 would be to add which schools to the list?
The additional schools for,
So option 4 would be Bellevue. Option 5 would be York Road.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mildred?
I have a few concerns. First one is, with this taking place, have you thought about the distance of travel for students? How long will the child stay on the bus traveling from home to school, back home? And also, I know we should move away from, as far as balancing our schools. What would that do with trying to balance with moving? And I was concerned about a school that has not been built that long, that you're looking at the option 0 point. So, I'm going to stop right there.
let me make sure that I have all, first of all, with the bus rides. That's one of the things that we're looking at, being able to optimize as far as the time that students will spend on the buses. When you look at some of our satellites, students are on buses. We have been told, and we know for at least an hour, what this will do is actually bring them to schools that are closer to where their residents are. And that will cut down on the bus rides that many of these students are experiencing who are in those 5 large pockets or satellite areas that we have. So that was one of the things that we looked at when we were trying to eliminate those pockets. And do you have the next question written down? I didn't get all of them, I'm sorry.
Equity? As far as equity was concerned?
As far as the equity, with equity within the schools, as far as balance, there are so many pieces of that.
Right.
As you can see, when you start to move students one way or the other, those are pieces that we have to take into consideration, but there are some that we have to ensure that everything is not based on this one piece. So that's where we have looked at. If you look at those sheets, we actually have 3 columns on one of the sheets so that we could look at other pieces of information such as free and reduced lunch and how our ethnicities are actually broken down within the schools. And so that is being taken into consideration.
And I need to clarify something. I made a mistake. Option 4 is Bellevue. Option 5 is Richmond Drive, not York Road, Richmond Drive. I apologize.
Quick question, on option 4 and option 5, you have both 62.1% capacity, is that correct? On option 4 and 5? On both option 4 and option 5, you have percent capacity for both options, 62.1%. That isn't correct, is it?
That's an average.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just an average.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
If you were going to repurpose another school, option 5, of course, should go up in percentage.
I'll double check. I'll be completely honest with you. 4 and 5 was really not my priority for over the weekend. I was focused primarily on 2B and 3C, but I'll double check that and get back with you.
All right, appreciate it.
Just to follow back up on something that Mildred brought up, she had a question regarding Old Point, and just clarify that Old Point is not part of either one of these options, correct? In terms of any changes or repurposing, they may get additional students and so forth. I think what we're all seeing is that there are a couple of schools under option 3C where their utilization are getting a little lower than what it has been before. But I'm assuming that we know that there are developments coming in those areas, and that's why that capacity is low. And I'm looking specifically at, I think, Mount Gallant and Old Point being the 2 ones, right?
Those were schools that had segments in them, and when those segments were moved out, that brought down the geocoded number of students who are in that school. So that's where they were impacted, not by placing students there, but they had students to come out because many of those segments are in downtown, and that's what gave some of those students those rides of up to an hour to get to school.
Also, the virtual kids are lumped into these numbers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it looks to me like, as it's tough to say with option 4 and 5, because if they're lumped in there, it's kind of tough to tell which schools would actually be at what percentages. So you have, like, say, take Evanport would be at 90.5%. I guess we have to look at how many of those kids are virtual, because the main thing is to make sure we don't go over 20 kids per classroom.
So many of the calculations, remember, were based off of geocoded numbers because how parents would choose to assign their students based on changes could impact what, their decision. So it's based on geocoded numbers. And also on one of the spreadsheets, we gave you the current enrollment, the current percentage of number of students that are currently in virtual in school with a percentage. And then we also gave you if that number of students in virtual was reduced by 10% and by 20%. So depending on situations with COVID going forward, we were trying to, it's hard to project how many parents will stay in virtual academy versus, transitioning out. And so we tried to give you multiple data points so you could look at that and see a trend, or, once we made some decision, we would have more information, we might be able to project more. But the actual enrollment in each school would be difficult to project. That's why we had to stay focused on just what was geocoded, because obviously as a parent, that would impact your decision one way or another.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, 2 points about, and I'm not sure we mentioned it as clearly, and maybe even more so for the benefit of our viewing audience, is that We currently, in the map that Mr. Allen looked at as the district, we have those 5 pockets of segments, if you will, that are currently attending a school that are not near their home. And that's the 2002 work that was done to look at that balance. So those 5 pockets, and one of those is where Old Point does have one of those. And so looking at those options, in particular with option 2B, those students would go to their school closer to their home than they currently do. So the travel time that Mr. Vaughn and others mentioned on buses, those 5 pockets are about an hour average, we think, of being able to cut down on that. If you want to take a look, the board has in these sheets here, any of those that have these graphs, this happens to be the 4 and 5 option that Mr. Vaughn, and they are labeled at the top with the school letters so that you can be clear on which schools those are. But you can look at the current Power School number column, the current students in the geocode, and then looking at those percent capacities. And that information shared along those charts tells what ethnicity as well as the free and reduced lunch numbers for those students in Power School. Is that correct with the percentage, Mr. Allen?
For the ethnicity?
Yes.
Those are based on geocode.
The geocode, thank you for clarifying that. And so you can currently see what the balance is and what the balance is not. So I think one of the takeaways in looking at what we currently have is that we don't have, clear balance across the district as it exists now. And so what Mr. Allen did is looking at those closest to home as well as looking at trying to create some balance where possible. I want to remind the board from interacting with this information, knowing this information about our district, we believe that having choice programs for our families to access in the academic areas is a strength, and we want to continue building upon that. But when we do that, it is important to also note that then we are automatically creating opportunities for imbalance. So we need to look at strategies for those schools that will be imbalanced to make sure that we're addressing the needs. And I think we have an excellent example in our school district with Sunset Park. Sunset Park is where, based on programming, we pull students in who help to diversify, the school. So I think that is a positive example. And then certainly with option 2, that also assures parents who are moving into the school district that where I move to, I get a chance to go to a school closer to my home than being bused across the district for an hour. And in many cases, those are some of our neediest children who are spending more time on a bus and having to not be with their peers or their neighborhood closer. So I just want to make some of those points as well. And clarifying just to piggyback on some of that question.
And I do believe Ms. Owens has some questions. Robin?
I do, thank you. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
I want to reiterate what other board members said regarding, I'm getting so much feedback. Is there anything we can do about that? Okay, I want to reiterate what some other board members said about Mount Gallant and Old Point, and I think that's an uncomfortable level of lowness in terms of the percentage of students that would be assigned in option 3C. And Richmond Drive, I think, is uncomfortably high, as well as to a lesser extent Bellevue and Evanport. So as a board member, I feel like we should look at that. I know that you've really focused on affecting as few students as possible, but if we're going through this process, I hate to leave these students are these schools severely under or over enrolled?
And I think the other thing to kind of follow back up on that comment from Ms. Owens is that we also have to consider our staff, right? So when you drastically reduce the amount of students that are attending a school and shift those somewhere else, there are staff members that are at that school, they're going to kind of have to move with the kids, so to speak, right? So I hear what you're saying with having the minimal impact on children, but we also have to consider our staff members, kind of as a follow-up to what Robin was saying. So,
Helene, I have a couple of other questions
Yeah,
too
go right
before
ahead.
you move on. I just want to clarify when we're talking about another 4K dedicated school, we are talking about an additional school, not a replacement for Central Child Development Center. We are talking to a 4K program in addition to what we have at Central Child Development Center. And if anybody could offer the statistics on what our need is in terms of additional 4K students we really need to serve, and even just to touch a little bit on the benefit of adding a more comprehensive 4K program.
Team, may I take that question? Anybody going to fight me for it? All right. Ms. Owens, I want to please cause me to back up and clarify or give, if I fail to mention pieces of it. If I understood your question correctly, what the district would be looking at is having one district pre-K center. We currently have multiple classes across the district for pre-K. We have a wonderful facility that is designated for pre-K, half-day programs, the Central Child Development. What we are looking at and for is having one designated place for students who are 4-year-olds and who would be able to, whether they're regular ed or special ed or whatever that need may be, to be in one location. Both of the options that the team has shared would allow for approximately 650 to 700, I think, depending on which one, it might be 660 for capacity. So as we look to expand services to 4-year-olds to address student achievement early on in the district, we would have one location. Currently, we have, I believe, there are 10, and Dr. Brakefield, I'll ask you to confirm that with me, 10 places in our district excluding Ebenezer, which is Montessori pre-K, and we would not impact that building. So Montessori, because it is a philosophical way of working with 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds, we would continue to support that choice program. And this additional would be bringing all of our pre-K programs under one roof. We cannot do that at Central Child Development, so we would need one of our other facilities to be able to do that. And then we would not only would be able to offer full day opportunities for our students who are currently in half day, which is about 400 total. So now going from half day to full day for those who we could support in that way, plus being able to add, I believe it was 75 more students for accessing early intervention education. So what part might I have left out to your question? And team, if I have left out anything, you please help me fill in those blanks.
I just wanted to reiterate that we were, that we were still planning to operate into the future at Central Child Development Center, and this would be an additional facility.
Thank you for causing us to clarify. And again, we have our Ebenezer Montessori program, and then we do have 8 Title I programs at each Title I school. We have Central Child Development. We have pre-K programs at ATC. And have I left any out, Dr. Brakefield? Old Point. So those are the ones that we would look to support, and we know the research, the earlier that we get our children in school, the better that they are, the more resources that we can provide early on, is an intervention for those children who need that. And I want to, make sure I am commending and acknowledging the great work that we already do in the area of pre-K. Our pre-K teachers, staff do a great job, and this is an opportunity for us to bring them all under one roof and also support them with the services that other K-5 children have, like related arts and other experiences that they could have. So it would be expanding our pre-K, which is one of our district goals.
So just to summarize, what you're saying is that every single pre-K program in the district would be in one facility with the exception of the Montessori pre-K.
I believe that is correct. Yes, ma'am. You have summarized all my comments there. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Cook, we're looking at, too, that every child, it wouldn't be based on income. It would just be public education,
Well, expanding the program would allow us to
Right,
meet
see, like
more children
Central
and
Child
needs.
Development is based on income.
We would hope to expand the opportunity for other children who currently aren't eligible in addition to, again, expanding the program in that way. Yes, ma'am.
And then my last question, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, may I have one more?
Yes, I have one more, and then Ms. Cherry will follow you.
The numbers, Ms. Smith, that you offered for the per pupil cost and the building cost on maintenance and utilities. So you calculated that per pupil cost for maintenance and utilities based on the number of students and the cost, that the monies that were actually spent on that particular building, either for maintenance or for utilities. Were the lower enrollment numbers more a driver of that cost per pupil, or were the higher costs for utilities and maintenance in those older facilities more the driver of that higher cost per pupil, or was it a combination of both? So, for example, Finley Road has a maintenance cost of $242 per pupil. Is that more driven by the higher cost of maintaining Finley Road or the lower enrollment at Finley Road?
It is really driven by the number of students that are actually there at that school. So as we know that if we have a building that has more students utilizing that building, that cost per student will actually go down. So the utilities, when you look at per square footage across those elementary schools, they're fairly consistent. There are some years where we may have, colder months or, warmer summers, but consistently they're about the same. But it is per pupil. When you look at those, when you have the smaller schools, they tend to be more expensive when you look at a per pupil basis.
So we're spending money on maintenance and utilities that could probably be better allocated to programming and academics if we were able to consolidate students under a smaller number of schools.
Depending on the purpose of some schools, if it's repurposed versus another option of not utilizing a building, if you're going to be repurposing, you're still going to have those utility costs. They may be a little bit lower, depending on how many people are in that building, but the utilities are going to be fairly the same. In regards to maintenance cost, it depends on what maintenance items that needs to take place to maintain that building. Are we going to continue to upkeep the grounds and cut the grass? We're always going to have cleaning supplies that, we have to go and clean those rooms and those buildings. So there's some of those that we are still going to have.
And just as a reminder,
To our board and to the community, Rock Hill School District 3 is provided by 3 different utility providers, just as a reminder.
Ms. Cherry?
Yes, my question was concerning the pre-K. Has any particular school been significantly designated for where that program would be? I know we've thrown out Finley Road and I think Rosewood. Or will a newer building be built to house the 4K program?
Great question, Ms. Cherry. And Mr. Vaughn is working to do a study to see exactly, that's why we have not named in this, to the board. We've not made a decision or don't have a recommendation to make to the board at this time. So he is continuing to work with folks to get some cost estimates of what it would require. Certainly, we see some benefits to both, and with some of those variables, they seem to lead to one building versus another, but it has not been decided at this point. We would want to, get those final estimates because there would be the need to add, to make some modifications to the building to outfit those 4-year-olds that we currently don't have. But we believe, based on the preliminary numbers that Mr. Vaughn is collecting, that it would be minimal, and we do not propose to build a new building for the center. It would be repurposing one of our existing facilities.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Falkenberry?
This question, I guess, is a little bit similar to Ms. Owen's question, but I know that we've been provided the data for things like maintenance costs, utility costs per pupil. I'd really like to see what that total cost is, the total number of what we're spending, not counting overhead or salary, excuse me. So what is the total cost per school? And then break that down as maintenance, utilities. I know the utilities is going to be relatively close, but I suspect that the maintenance on a 80-year-old building is going to be a lot more than maintenance on a 10-year-old building. So I'd really like to see it broken down by school, not by utilization. But I understand why we did it per pupil, but I think that it would give us a lot of insights on how much we're spending, and that may play the total spend may play a role in some of these decisions as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. I will definitely provide that information. I do have it, and so I will definitely give that to Dr. Cook to provide to you.
Great, thank you.
so I have 2 questions. The first one is in relation to the 4K building, to be determined where that would be, right? We've mentioned the cost of retrofitting that building. Would that be, is it the general plan that would be 8% money, or how do we finance that? Or is it existing money in capital that we have sitting, or combination?
It could be a combination. When we get those final costs, we'll know a little bit better. But, right now, our plan would be to first consider the 8% monies.
In other words, not a bond referendum, I guess is
No,
what
ma'am. No bond referendum
being
considered
clear
at
about.
this time for what's being proposed. No, ma'am.
Okay. Second question is, obviously, what we've seen here is things that impacts elementary school, but we also know that people are well aware of the feeding patterns going into middle and high. So I just want, for the viewing audience, kind of a thought process on middle and high, making sure that this would not change kids' attendance zone going into middle and high school. Is that correct?
That is correct. In looking currently at our elementary schools, and the board knows well, as we have looked over 2 years of the underutilized buildings that we have in our inventory, and so trying to address the needs there. Certainly, I think at some future point, we would want to have that discussion. But our middle schools and high schools are more balanced from a utilization as well as other criteria that the board is looking at with elementary schools.
Okay. Ms. Wendy?
I'm most interested in understanding the cost savings for each of these plans.
I'm sorry, Ms. Cole, would you repeat that, please?
I would like to see the cost savings for each of these plans.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I think the information Mr. Falconberry requested that Ms. Smith has already, we'll get that to you, and I think that'll share insight into that information too.
The other piece that I would like more information on too relates to staff. Obviously, anytime where you propose change, change is difficult and change causes anxiety. We know that some of the schools that we are discussing tonight is the home of staff and students. But I need you to kind of talk through the staffing and kind of reassure our community that this does not mean that there's not a place for the people who are employed in buildings that are being discussed tonight.
And, the team, I've probably done more answering of questions than I should have tonight, but this is one that, Madam Chair, I do want to answer myself to be responsible for. The options that you are seeing being shared with you this evening do not include losing any staff. This board, this district staff very much values the work and the team members that we have currently in place. The number of children that we have are going to continue to exist. We hope to continue to grow. We know that the virtual academy has an impact, and we don't know what level that has, but we still have the same number of children who have to be served virtually or face-to-face. And so we will continue and commit to making sure that our staff are continuing to be part of our team. Certainly, some of those special positions that one may wonder about will, I believe, take care through natural attrition. We are continuing, people have life-changing experiences that require them to go in different directions for whatever reason, and there is no concern, and we can commit today to our staff that we will continue to have our staff members in place. So I appreciate you asking that question because I have had the opportunity to speak with both staffs last week just as a possible conversation of options, no decision, but options that were being considered, and I have committed as the superintendent to make sure that we do everything to keep our team members in this district.
So I believe that concludes your PowerPoint presentation, correct?
Team, is there anything else that needs to be shared or any other details that have been left out or things that you may have thought about that need to be shared with the board? And while they're thinking, board, I do ask, it is our recommendation to put out for your feedback and the community's feedback, option 1, 2B, and 3C. We certainly can add those others if that is the board's wishes, but there are some caution that I would just add of that many adjustments. And certainly, as Ms. Owens has highlighted, we want to go back and take that feedback, and we'll bring a final recommendation through this process of community feedback, board feedback, but it would be our recommendation tonight to only consider 1, 2B, and 3C as options for the board and community to give feedback on. That's the recommendation at this time, and to continue looking at other ways to address academic programming of balance and need. One of the areas that we did not touch much on, Ms. Wallace mentioned it, is open enrollment to address the underutilization of some buildings that we'd like to bring back and use as a strategy at a future point when it would be appropriate and things are settled with the numbers. So, team, anything else that you want to share that's been left out? Any other points?
I would just say on the information that the board has for options 4 and 5, I still need to go through the numbers for the demographics. Those aren't completely finished.
Okay.
I do believe Mr. Falconberry has a comment or question.
Yeah, I was just going to request, I guess, as we're soliciting this input from, the community and other stakeholders, if we're doing that in some sort of, a questionnaire or something like that, if it's some sort of a formal communication, if we're not just waiting for feedback to come to us, I would ask that we ask about options 4 and 5 and don't limit it to just the first 3, because if we just ask about the first 3, we're only going to get those opinions. So I would ask that we ask the open-ended question of what all do you support versus just focusing on the first 3. I understand that is the recommendation from the school, from you all, but if we're looking for opinions, I'd rather get an open opinion across all options and then understand how those weigh against the recommendations that you guys are bringing to us.
And kind of a follow-up to what Brent is saying, I think it's also helpful for board. Right now, there are 3 of us that probably would receive some of this feedback, potentially depending on, because we do have children in the school system, but the remainder of the board members do not. So it would be helpful if all the board would receive a copy in advance before it goes out so that we know what this survey looks like. So we're more able to be able to communicate with our constituents as questions come in. And again, I know that James, Brent, and I will probably receive it as parents, but, for the other 4, I think that's pertinent.
And Mr. Frosten will be working to communicate that out and to collect that information. We would also ask each school, not knowing what the board's direction would be tonight, but we'll be asking each school tomorrow to share that with their school improvement council as well as their community, and make sure that that communication and these options have been clearly articulated. So we'll certainly make sure all board members are receiving that.
As a matter of fact, speaking about school improvement councils, I think that it would be very helpful if the board could get a short written kind of opinion from those impacted school improvement councils so that we know kind of where their thought process are in the midst of it. And I realize that, the time frame is short, but given the impact that we value how school improvement councils function and the role they play in the schools, I think it's very pertinent for us to get that information. The last comment I have regarding how we seek community input, I think it's very important that we use all kinds of different channels available to us. We know that all groups in our community does not communicate necessarily electronically. We need to make sure that we reach everybody through sources, even if it's, through some of our faith-based organizations or paper copies or whatever it may be. But I would hate for us to only get feedback from one segment of our community where it impacts all.
Madam Chair, for clarification, with the written feedback from school improvement councils, is that from the schools who are being considered for repurposing or others, or is that from, or are we thinking from all school improvement councils?
I think it would be nice to get it from all schools that are impacted in some way, shape, or form. Whether it is an increase or a decrease in student population, because some of these schools are going to change drastically if we look at the options that involves the no attendance pockets, right? And I think that having that feedback from those SICs is something that board would certainly like to see. I see a lot of nods, and I think, it doesn't have to be a dissertation, couple of paragraphs just kind of summarizing how they feel about it would certainly help us in our decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, team? Okay, all right. I think that concludes the presentation for consideration right now.
All right, perfect. Before I ask board if there's anything else, I would also hope that as part of the feedback decisioning, that we can get some of this information up in an easily accessible place on the website for parents and community to look, because not everybody is going to necessarily know to open up the board packet and scroll down to page 205, if that makes sense. So if we could do something similar to what we've done when we've had referendums or other things that are pertinent to the community where people can kind of have a Q&A and easily access information, I think that would make both school individuals and people in the DO's life a little easier if we have one point of information. Anything else from board regarding this process at this point? Nope? Okay, well then, thank you to everybody involved. This has certainly been a lot of information for board to go through, even at this initial stage. So I can only imagine how much time it has taken team to assemble it, and I appreciate the thoroughness and the details and the numbers, and we look forward to get the additional requested data.